Hello and welcome to Hops and Brews. This week,
There's smoke in here. Smoked malts. That's a cool one. I think it's a cool intro.
For an open window on a crappy world, Max and Chris from Ups and Brew. Ups and Brew. Welcome to Ups and Brews.
alright, so this week we're taking a look at, This week, we're taking a look at a historical malt, which is Smoked Malt. It's used more than you would think, but it's still one of those very special malts that some people really don't like. Chris, any information on the history behind the Smoked Malt?
First point, I'm a huge fan of smoked beers, so I'm super stoked to talk about this subject this week. I'm probably the only one drinking smoked beers around the whole area.
I think you are.
Yeah,
I think you are. I despise smoked beers. I'm really not a fan. Although I have had some from the college that weren't that bad, but they were very subtle in smoke.
But if you are from Bamberg in Germany, which is in the Franconian part of Bavaria, don't question me, they all drink smoked beers. This is where smoked beers are probably stayed alive, because back in the historical part of beer, the kilning process of malt was done over an open flame, which gave it a smoked aroma. Then with the new development of technologies and all that, it was moved on to most cost-effective and less infected by the smoked aromas. But in Bamberg, Germany, they still kept this going. So they smoked their own malts in-house. There's a bunch of breweries in Bamberg that do it by themselves, all smoked with hardwood, which is something that I've never really thought about it, because if you used a softer wood to smoke your own malts, you'll end up with woods that have more resin in them and give them more of a bad smoky aroma. I wasn't really aware of that. It's, I guess, wood science at this point.
Yeah, the wood is going to affect it tremendously.
Yeah.
A lot of people use peat to smoke their malts to get that kind of Scotch, whiskey kind of smoke in there, because peat is readily available for that. But some people use oak, some people use, in Canada, a lot of people have been playing around with maple.
Yep.
And some use cherry wood, which is kind of, it gives more of like fruity, quote unquote. Like the wood is going to affect the smoke that is attributed to your malt, that's for sure. So wood, smoke, very important.
So in general, smoking your malts is not a very, very niche thing in beer if you think about it, because in this part of Germany, I've heard that it's probably like you only drink liters of the smoked beers that they have. And whether it's 40 degrees Celsius outside or minus 40, they're still drinking smoked beers. What I'm very curious about it is because I love Rauch beers. It's a fantastic style, but I've had the opportunity to try lighter style like Gratzers, which is 3% light wheat beer that's made with smoked malts. Very subtle, and it's a completely different way to discover smoke in beer. Max, as a brewer or as a home brewer, how can you implement smoke into your beer without turning your beer into literally a barbecue or a cigarette?
So smoke is a very first off, to go back to historically how malts were created, were smoked. So yes, you had to malt your grain. That was the way that you would brew with, and the initial way to do that would be over an open flame. That's why you got all the smoke. Until the invention of the Oast House. There's a couple breweries that have taken that theme as their main brewery theme. The Oast House permitted the maltsters to indirectly malt their grain, or indirectly smoke their grain, indirectly kiln their grain, drying drying it in a way that it would not overly add different flavors to it. It revolutionized malting for sure. And even if you go way back, when breweries and maltsters kind of separated, they kind of went their own different way. That's when you started to see a lot more being done with malts. It was not a one brewery thing where you would do always the same beer and you would always have the same process. It made it so that maltsters could develop new grains, you know, the new methods, naturally stay in contact with the brewers to see what they really wanted and what would work and what would not work. Now, how do you smoke your beer? Now, for a home brewer, you would buy smoked malt. It is readily available in a lot of different shops. You have to be careful, though, because smoke is a volatile aroma, so with time, it will leave your malt. For home brewers, doesn't really matter. I mean, you're probably going to go through your bag fairly fast, and in the end, it's your beer, you know, you do it the way you want it to do. Now, for an actual brewer, for a brewery, I mean, Mill Street has a smoked beer they do every year, and they kiln their own malt for it. They smoke their own malt, I should say, which is kind of cool. I feel like if you're going to do it, you might as well do it that way, and a little bit of smoked malt will go a long way when it's fresh.
Yep.
Personally, I think it's very hard to really calculate because of that factor. The more time between when it's done towards when you use it, it's going to change the flavor tremendously within that time. So you kind of have to gauge it. And just like hops and alpha acids, you kind of have to go, all right, well, it's smokier than last time, or it's less smoky than the first time. I should add more or less of that. Again, a little goes a long way with smoked malt. You don't want to overly smoke your beer.
I guess it's hard to kind of like balance it out because there's no number that says on your smoked malt that it's like 8% smoky, or, you know, alpha acids, it's going to be this level. I can gauge it that way. For a malt that's smoky, it could be a little bit more smoked than the other one, I guess. Like, there's a light smoke
100%,
and
100%.
a stronger smoked one.
Yeah, you kind of have to taste your malt, smell it, figure out, okay, well, maybe it is smokier than last time, or maybe it's not, and then you brew it. I would never recommend that as a flagship because of that. You're always going to have some fluctuation in your smoke, and it's always going to be kind of a vintage, you know? Like, one year is going to be the perfect smoke, the next year might not be. Or you do it the Mill Street way, and you kind of go for your own smoke, and you know exactly what you're doing every year. At least you kind of know exactly what you're doing every year.
Yeah, and at Chanlib, when we were there 2 weeks ago at the event, they did like a brew day at the same time as the event, just to kind of like keep up and showcase the way of brewing a farmhouse style of beer. And they smoked malts from early morning when they started the brewing process, so they can put some freshly smoked malts in their farmhouse, which was brewed with Vike. So I'm pretty stoked on how it's gonna turn out if you think about it. Like
It should be interesting for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going in there, and I think it showcased a little bit how it could be handmade by a lot of breweries, because you transform one of the main ingredients you have in your beer in-house instead of buying it already, you know, made. So for breweries that have access to maple wood or a different type of wood, like you said, cherry wood or apple wood, I think it could create some sort of very niche aromas from the region where the brewery is located.
100%. Now, if you're asking me if I'm ever going to brew with smoked malts, probably not. I'm not a huge fan. Generally, when you go to a brewery and you see no stouts on the menu, it's probably because the brewer doesn't like stouts. And if there's one in the winter, it's because the owner goes, we need a stout because it's going to sell. But if there's no passion behind what you're doing, you're not going to end up with a great result. I don't like smoked malt, so I don't know how much to put in for people to like it. To me, it's put 0 in and you'll get the result you want. But that said, I did have a smoked beer from a cellar in Germany, directly from the Bright Tank. I forget the name of the actual beer, at least I can't pronounce it, so I'm not going to attempt it. And from that cellar, in that environment, with the brewmaster there serving the beer, it was good. It was decent. You know, I had a good time. I've had the same beer in Canada and hated it completely. So environment has a lot to do.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm going to play around with it a lot. I mean, we'll see.
If you don't want to play around with it, there's a brewery in Toronto called Godspeed Brewery, which is an ex-brewer from Dieu du Ciel, and he's amazing with smoked malts. And he doesn't mess around. He uses it a lot in his beers. So if you happen to be around Toronto, that's a good stop to discover some smoked beers, if they are available, of course.
Awesome. Well, if you liked the video, please leave a like, subscribe, share, and let us know in the comments below what you'd like to see in the next episode of Hops and Bros.
Hopefully it will still be smoke. Just for you, Max. Since you love it so much.